Well. Here again, another week, another book. This week, I read The Song of Achilles by Madeline Miller. And spoiler, I really liked it. Certainly lives up to the hype. And Madeline Miller certainly lives up to the renown that she's been amassing from her publications. The Song of Achilles is indeed a retelling of the myth of Achilles from birth to death. But it's through the eyes of the super mundane, super normal boyfriend, Patroclus. Full disclosure, when I started reading this book, I had the realization that I had no idea about most of Achilles' story. I know he fought in the Trojan War, and I know that his mom dipped him in a pool of Baja Blast and gave him that ankle issue he has. And I know, obviously, that he dies in the Trojan War when he goes on his little love rampage. Everything else either leaked out of my brain a long time ago, or I never really knew it. Like, for instance, it never dawned on me that Achilles and Patroclus, they were probably dating in most versions of this story. I think my only encounter before this with that interaction, other than Hades, where they are lovers, is the 2004 Troy movie where they're cousins. And so when Achilles is really mad that Patroclus dies, spoiler alert for a 4,000-year-old story, it's more of a familial rage than like a lover's rage. But I still didn't expect them to be loving on each other in this book initially. When Patroclus is admiring Achilles' feet, I was like, I wonder if they're gonna smooch. And then they totally smooch, and it's really cool. So reading this from a perspective of not knowing what's going to happen, but knowing the end goal, I think it was really interesting. Of course, this book being from the eyes of Patroclus gives it significantly more depth than if we were following around Achilles. Madeline Miller does a really good job of creating this tension for Achilles through Patroclus. He's being pulled in two different directions. He's being pulled towards Aristos Achaean, the greatest of the Greeks, with all of the societal and personal expectations that holds. And he's looking at Patroclus to be happy, to be human, to be normal. That tension is clearly what's driving this whole story. Patroclus has to constantly be fighting with all of Greece just to be with Achilles. I think giving us this story through the eyes of Patroclus chips away at the mythos of this story a lot and brings it down to a more mundane level where Patroclus is just a guy, scared of killing, scared of dying. It kind of pushes back against the societal norms of what you expect from the legends of Greece. And you have this internal struggle that he feels when he knows that Achilles has to meet these societal norms for himself. He has to be this legend that everyone knows he should be, but he also wants him to be better. And it's heartbreaking sometimes to see this war inside Patroclus. I think if I were to complain about something in this book, it would be that Achilles feels really flat. He feels like a figure of mythology and not like a person. It doesn't feel like he has a lot of agency. He's just kind of being dragged from point to point because that's what is fated for him. Obviously, his love for Patroclus is there. Their interactions are really fun and really enjoyable. Their relationship feels really well done. But when I think back, Achilles is way more of a plot device than a person. And so that's kind of a letdown here. From a technical standpoint, I think this book is extremely well structured and well paced. I was surprised to see just how much we had to read to get to Troy. I didn't even notice though, until we were touching down on the beaches of Troy. I looked and I saw that we were more than halfway through this book, and I was surprised. I enjoyed everything building up to it, but I just realized, wow, a lot happens before we got there. And then Troy's like a 10-year war. Madeline Miller's descriptions are beautiful, but also they're concrete. They really helped set the tone of Greek mythos while not feeling like they're too wordy or too poetic. It skirts this fine line of definitely being a modern book, but it captures that ancient vibe really well. This book is a fantastic read, especially if you're into Greek mythology. It's kind of got me in the mood to go back and maybe read all the Percy Jackson books. I think I only ever ended up reading 2 or 3 of them when I was young. And I'm definitely picking up her other book, Circe, when I get around to it. I've got a pile of books that I gotta get through, and I don't want to keep adding to it, but Circe is on my more extended list already. This book is only like 100,000 words, I think around the same length as To Kill a Mockingbird. But yeah, I'll give this 5 out of 5 of the muses from Hercules. You mean Hercules? I did want to talk about some of the spoiler bits in this book. I guess I've already spoiled that Achilles dies and Patroclus dies. Like, whoa, that's the more general myth though, and that's not really being spoiled. If you go into this book and you don't know that, oops. The first thing I want to say is I 1,000,000,000,000,000% cried at the end of this book. I was not ready for it. When Thetis is being told by Patroclus about Achilles' life, I was just sad, just all over. It was horrible. I don't tend to cry for books, but I guess recently that's not been true. I cried for Rhythm of War. I cried for this book. I think I cried for another book in between those two. But yeah, this new emotions for me, which is wild. But anyway, I think that the happy ending here was really important for this book. We all knew this was set up to be a tragedy. The tone throughout this book is set to be a tragedy. The fates are telling you that this is going to end badly. And then it doesn't. It kind of does, but we get that eternal life afterwards for them to be together, especially with the gift that Thetis gives of putting Patroclus' name on his tomb. I think that just strengthened this whole story a lot. It wasn't a whole bunch of build-up, an amazing relationship, just to have some tragedy porn at the end. We got to see these characters reach a goal, even if it wasn't the goal that they thought they were going to get to. Achilles wanted to be a hero, and he wanted to be happy. He still gets to be happy at the end of this book. And I guess he was kind of a hero, but he wasn't the hero that ended the Trojan War. I also want to commend Madeline Miller for her use of mythology in this book. The magics of the ancient Greece is so weird and really hard to nail down that I think she chose bits and pieces that felt realistic and made this feel more of a human book than a book of myths. Like, she decided to remove the weakness of Achilles and that whole portion of the myth, the thing that he's famous for mostly in common conversation, is completely not in this book. And it's addressed that was a myth back then. I think Paris is like, oh, but doesn't he got the Anki? And then someone's like, he's still a dude, just kill him. And the myth is perpetuated by the fear of Achilles, by how good he is of a fighter. We see this when Patroclus puts on his armor. People aren't able to kill him because they're just so scared of him. And because he's good, but because they are so scared of this legend that they've built up in their minds. I also think that the structure of Patroclus still telling this story as a spirit lashed to the land that he was felled in continues that idea of mythological but realistic. We still need a narrator for the end of this book. And it feels extremely natural at this point of the story to tell it through his eyes. There's enough suspension of, oh, of course he's going to keep telling this story. It keeps that emotional momentum going for the reader. I think this might have been a really awkward transition when he dies, but Madeline Miller was able to navigate this beautifully. We also get a lot of his emotional reactions towards Achilles' choices after he's killed. Those moments are also really powerful and done extremely well through the fact that Patroclus is still the narrator. I'm also not one for romance stories. I don't tend to get attached to characters' relationships in books where the relationship isn't the core structure, and I'm not normally attracted to books where the relationship is the core structure. This was kind of a total 180 from that entire opinion. Not only is the focus their relationship, but I got extremely attached to it. It really drew me into this relationship. It really made me want them to be happy. It made me hurt when Patroclus hurt, when he finds Achilles was married on Scyros, or when he's begging Achilles to fight. I felt that as well. And even when they're happy, even when they're just casually messing around, I felt happy for them. And I have to give Madeline Miller props to that, for kind of changing my whole opinion of romance and literature. That's really cool that even now I can have a book that kind of changes my opinions on certain styles or certain choices that are made in books, where most of the time I would probably say, relationships aren't the greatest part of a book. I think this completely proved me wrong. I think you can have a relationship and that be the pivotal point of a book and have it be an amazing book because of it. And with that, if you liked what I had to say here, if you want to go pick this book up, or you want to cry all over again because I brought back these memories of this amazing story, hit that like button. And if you haven't yet, hit that subscribe button. I want to thank you so much for watching this video. I'll catch you in the next one. And until then, stay lit.